Hey everybody, welcome back to Stable Dividends. Today what we're going over is, are Republicans or Democrats better for the economy and the stock market? If you're a subscriber of this channel, welcome back. If you're new, please hit that subscribe button down below. Only takes a few seconds. It's free and I would really appreciate it. And thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. Who is better? So we're going to go through some Google searches. We're going to go through NBC, some other stuff, Motley Fool. I'm going to tell you what we're currently at right now. So you're going to see, right, the rates of return depending on who's in power. And then I'll also show you as well how to invest like them. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Nancy Pelosi legit has a better record at investing than Warren Buffett. We believe that she knows inside knowledge. That's why. But regardless, she has a better track record. So let's get into it. Who's better? Let's start off with a Google search, right? That's what everyone does. Are Republicans or Democrats better for the economy, right? They're not exactly the same economy and stock market, but they are somewhat correlated. They say since World War II, the United States economy has performed significantly better on average under the administration of Democratic presidents and Republican presidents, which is kind of interesting because now we're going to go into some different stuff. So everyone says like, oh, whoever's president, right, is going to make a big thing. That's not really true. So now we go to the NBC article or CNBC. So when you look here, you actually have to break down not only who is the president and which party they belong to, but also who controls the House and the Senate that makes up the Congress that makes up most of our government, right? So historical market performance, basically what it looks like if you have a unified, actually, let's go from top to bottom. So when you have a split Congress, right? Let's say a Democratic president and then a House and Senate that's split between the parties, you only have 4 years of data, but that is actually the best as far as performing goes. The next is going to be unified Congress. When there's a Democratic president, but Republicans are controlling the entire Congress, this is a decade worth of information, 13%, which is pretty good. And then unified, when Republicans own the president, the Senate, and the House, right? They were voted into all of those. They have 8 years of experience and data, 12.9%. So it's kind of mixed in general. I think they like split better, right? So when Democratic president is in there and Republican Congress, right? 13%. And it has 10 years worth of data versus this only has 8 and 4. But pretty interesting. The next thing that I want to show you, I love this little graph, is again, it's not really just who is president, it's also really who controls Congress. I've listened to Kevin O'Leary, and he said he actually likes when Congress, right, is divided and it's not the same as the president, because that means there's not going to be a lot of changes. Because as a business, you have to plan for the next 6, 12, 24 months. And if you think there's going to be changes, right, because let's say Democrats control all three or Republicans control all three, bills can move quite easily from the House to the Senate to the president's desk, and they're usually signed versus when everything's divided. Not a lot of things change, so it's a lot easier to plan. So with that being said, basically a Democratic president, but a divided Congress is the best, 15.72. And then basically, if they have Republicans on the Congress, it's 14.55. Now, if you roll over to Republicans, same thing, Republican president, divided Congress, 12.2, and then Republicans owning everything, 11.7. It's crazy that Republican president, but Democratic Congress is 1%. I wonder how many years of experience and data they have on that. Now, what's also interesting is that you think, okay, so Republicans are definitely doing worse. Well, the thing is, Republicans were actually basically part of the Depression, unfortunately, right? And so what we look at, and if you, and besides that, right, because we're going since 1957 right here, the average compound growth for is 9.8% under Democratic presidents and 6% under Republican presidents, right? So again, you're thinking Democrats are better. But at the end of the day, I always take the median, not because it's favoring one party or another, but because averages can be skewed. Like for example, George Bush, whether if he was followed or not, he had the dot-com and then the great financial or the Great Recession. Obama came in basically at the tail end. And he also had Fed rates at 0, right? So you have to take these things into account. Or for example, Joe Biden, I don't have the exact numbers on what the stock market has been doing, but there's been a lot of inflation. Whether if it's his fault or not, you have to count these things in, right? And so, but when you look at this, S&P 500 has achieved a median compound annual growth rate of 8.9, about a percent lower than the average under Democratic presidents, and 10.2% under Republican presidents since 1957. So that's what's pretty interesting. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to tell you about, again, where we're at, right? Because now you know what's good, right, for stock market returns. Before we get into that, I really want to say thank you again to the subscribers. We have Christian Apologetics with the church fathers. We have Raffman. We have Ricardo Canelo, James Gill. Hector, I believe, I shouted you out last time. And I know I've shouted out everyone else here, but thank you so much. Again, hit that subscribe button. If you're new, it's free. It only takes a couple of seconds and it helps out the channel a lot. It shares it with more people. Now let's get into this. So basically the election is less than 100 days away, right? And what's our current setup here, right? So when we go here, what's the balance of power in the House? Right, so you go here, the Republicans own the House by a very small majority, which I would think is good for investors, because again, it's basically divided, right? I mean, I know Republicans technically have power. Same thing, but opposite in the Senate. Democrats basically have power in the Senate, but just by one. I know the VP, right, Kamala Harris, she can be a tie-breaking vote, but basically it's at a standstill. And right now we have Joe Biden as the president, right? So, in my opinion, well, it's not even my opinion at the end of the day. We have a Democratic president, and then we have a split Congress, and the Congress is so tight that I don't think much can really get passed, right? And so, when we go to a chart like this guy right here, Democratic president, and then a divided Congress, it's one of the best returns. I don't think we've seen that, but you know what? That's going to average out some of this information. Anyways, where are we going to go, right? So one, we wanted to know who's better, right? In general, it's you kind of want it divided. It kind of depends, and we also need more data. We also know where we're at right now: Democratic president, divided Congress. Now, where are we going to go? Based on what I follow politics fairly regularly. Basically, I think the Democrats might take the House back a little bit, basically be the same divided, but Democrats might pick up a seat or two, maybe. And then the U.S. Senate, I'm going to shout out election predictions here. What we're looking at is a small majority, Republicans 51 and Democrats 48, with a toss-up in Arizona. Here's another Senate map where the GOP has 50, but the toss-up is Montana. Looks like AZ will be going, Arizona will be going to the Democrats, possibly. Again, these are all predictions. We don't know. And as of right now, it looks like Donald Trump may win. And the thing is, I think it's going to come down to the wire in this election. It'll come down to October, November, and obviously that's when we vote. But I mean, like, momentum shifts, right? That's what I'm talking about. So, what would that be? That would be a Republican in power, right, on the top of the ticket as president. And then as we go to here, it'd be divided, and so you have 12.2, which is the best. Whether if you have a Democrat or Republican, you want divided, whichever is in there, for returns. Now, that being said, the last thing here, how do you vote for him? Or not how do you vote for him? How do you invest like him, right? Again, Nancy Pelosi has had a better track record than Warren Buffett because she's getting insider information, right? And so here's two ways to do it. One, this is for the Democrats, right? Unusual Whales, subversive Democratic trading ETF. And so far, it's actually been doing pretty well. It basically took off and, I don't know, listed here February of 2023. So if we go here, roughly, so it had about 30% in its first year alone in 2023. Obviously, it's coming off 2022, which was a bad year. So, it's a lot easier to go up after you've already gone down. But the Democrats are doing well. And if you see here, basically, this is what it looks like. Here's your sectors, right? And here's the top 10 holdings: NVIDIA, Microsoft. I don't even know what the heck that is. Salesforce, Apple, Google, which is Alphabet, Amazon, no clue. This is short-term maturity, probably some bonds, Netflix, and CrowdStrike, right? So that's what that looks like. Be careful of that expense ratio, but it is pretty interesting, right? And so basically, they have performed 37% since February of last year. Now let's go to the Republicans. I don't think the Republicans are doing as well. They're just not as good as Nancy Pelosi at investing, which I think is hilarious. But basically, they were listed at the exact same time, and they're only at 17, basically 18%. So that's basically 20% difference, which is pretty large. But let's look at the holdings here, right? So if we look at the holdings, we have JP Morgan Chase, Comfort Systems, no clue. That's AC or mattresses. I don't even know what that is. Nvidia, United Therapeutics, Arista, National Fuel Gas, Elevance Health, Shell, Simon Property Group, and Texas Instruments. I think I've only heard of like 5 of those companies, so I'm not sure what that's all about. Maybe Republicans are a little bit more like dividend investors, where they're a little bit more reserved, whether, instead of Democrats, which are a little bit more out there getting more of the tech forward. The expense ratio is weirdly higher, actually, just noticing that now, 0.83, right? The dividend yield for the Republicans is 1.14. I would have thought that was a little higher with the 2 different fuel in the top 10 there. Let's see what the yield is for the Democrats here. If I go through, okay, so the yield is 0.52. So you get double the yield, but 20% less. That's crazy. So, anyways, I thought that was pretty fun. The election's coming up. It's getting crazy. Regardless of your political affiliations, we all want the best for our money. And so now going forward, what is the best for your money. And regardless, stay invested and keep having those dividends roll in. Subscribe if you haven't yet at the bottom there. Really appreciate it. And until next time, stay happy.